The bar was the kind of place that didn't try to be anything more than what it was. Wooden stools with cracked vinyl seats. A jukebox in the corner that hadn't worked since 2019. Neon beer signs throwing orange and red light across faces that were mostly tired, mostly local, mostly done with whatever day they'd just survived. The smell of fried food and old wood and something that might have been hope once, a long time ago. She sat at the far end of the counter, away from the cluster of loud voices near the pool table. Away from the televisions bolted to the wall showing football highlights. Nobody was really watching. She sat with her back slightly angled, her right shoulder almost imperceptibly lower than her left, a habit so old it had become architecture. Something that came from years of carrying weight on one specific side of the body. Anyone trained to notice such things would have seen it immediately. Nobody here was trained to notice such things. Her name was Elena Vasquez. She was 37 years old. She ordered a beer she didn't especially want, because sitting at a bar and not ordering something felt like asking for a conversation, and she was not in the mood for conversation. She'd driven 4 hours to get here, not here specifically, not this particular bar with its cracked stools and broken jukebox, but here as in this city. This military-adjacent town that sat 15 miles from the coast and 20 miles from the installation. She had a meeting in the morning, a debrief. The kind where they hand you paperwork and shake your hand and say things like, "Your service was invaluable," in the same tone a doctor uses when he tells you the prognosis isn't good. She wrapped both hands around the bottle and stared at the label without reading it. 18 years. She had given 18 years. Not just of her time, but of the particular kind of time that takes something from you it never gives back. The kind of time measured not in calendars but in operations, in altitude. In the specific weight of a decision made at 2 in the morning in a country most people couldn't place on a map. She had been to those places. She had made those decisions. And she had come back from most of them carrying things that didn't show up on x-rays but pressed down on every part of her life regardless. Her daughter had turned 12 last month. Elena had missed the birthday. She'd missed 3 of them now, across the years, not consecutively, but enough that the gap between herself and her child had developed its own texture. Its own quiet grief that her daughter was too young to name, and too old to pretend wasn't there. She took a sip of her beer. It was cold. That was the best thing she could say about it. The group near the pool table had gotten louder. She registered this the way she registered most things in public spaces, not by looking but by listening. 4 voices, maybe 5. Male, young or youngish. The confident volume of men who believe the room belongs to them simply because they've entered it. One voice slightly louder than the others, always the way. She didn't look over. But then the loudest voice said something that pulled her attention sideways despite herself. It wasn't what he said, it was the cadence. That particular rhythm of military speech that gets embedded in the throat after enough years in service. Clipped, certain. The kind of tone that doesn't phrase things as questions even when it's technically asking one. She glanced briefly. There were 4 of them. All wearing civilian clothes that didn't quite manage to look civilian, the posture giving it away. The way they each held their spine like something they'd been taught to hold, rather than something that had grown naturally. But one of them was doing it differently, taller than the others, dark hair. He had the kind of face that had probably gotten him things his entire life. Not cruel, not unkind, just arranged in a way the world tends to reward. He was laughing at something one of his friends had said, and even his laugh carried that quality of complete self-assurance. The laugh of someone who has been told he is exceptional so many times the information has settled into his bones. She looked away, back to her beer. She was not interested. She was never interested in that particular type. Not because she disliked confidence, but because she had long since learned to distinguish between confidence and the performance of confidence. Between someone who had actually been through the fire and someone who had stood near enough to the fire to feel warm and mistaken that for the same thing. She didn't know anything about this man. She was already being unfair. She acknowledged this quietly, internally, and then let it go. She heard footsteps approaching the bar. She heard the voice order 2 more beers and a whiskey. She felt rather than saw the pause that followed. The specific pause of someone who has noticed something and is deciding whether to act on it. She kept her eyes on the label of her bottle. "You look like you're either thinking very hard about something," the voice said, "or you're trying to disappear." She didn't look up right away. She let a full second pass. Then she looked over. It was the tall one. Up close, the self-assurance was even more present. It radiated off him the way heat radiates off pavement in August. Not aggressive, not threatening. Just absolutely certain of itself. He was looking at her with a particular expression she recognized and despised in equal measure. It was the expression of someone who has assessed a situation and found it manageable, found her manageable. His eyes did a brief, almost professional sweep, the kind men sometimes did without realizing they were doing it, and then he smiled. The smile was the smirk, just barely, just at the edges. "Neither," she said, "just drinking a beer. Long day, long everything." He nodded like this was interesting. He was leaning on the bar now, relaxed, holding his space the way men who are used to holding space do. "You from around here?" "No, military." She looked at him steadily. "Why do you ask?" "The way you're sitting," he said, and there it was a flicker of something real beneath the performance. He actually had noticed. She recalibrated slightly. "And the way you scanned the room when I walked over, smooth, practiced." "Could be a lot of things," she said. "Could be," he agreed. And the smirk came back just slightly, that edge of someone who thinks he already knows the answer and is asking the question purely as a courtesy. "I'm Navy, SEAL. Just finished a rotation." He said it the way people say things they are used to impressing other people with. She nodded once, said nothing. His eyes moved over her again, not disrespectfully, but with the clinical assessment of someone categorizing. Civilian clothes, no unit insignia. Small frame, though he would have noticed she wasn't as small as she looked, the forearms, the hands, the shoulders, even slightly. But he looked at her and saw, she could tell, a woman alone in a bar. Perhaps a military spouse or a veteran of some administrative capacity, something adjacent but not equivalent. The smirk didn't quite leave his face. "So," he said, "what branch?" "Army," she said. "What did you do?" She paused for exactly the right amount of time. "Special operations," she said. He smiled. It was a polite smile, the kind that believes it is being generous. "Cool," he said. "Support role." She picked up her beer, took a long, slow sip, set it back down. "Something like that," she said. He got his drinks from the bartender and gave her one more look. Still that comfortable. Settled look of someone who has sorted a thing into its rightful category, and said it was nice talking to her. She watched him walk back to his friends, watched him say something that made them laugh. She didn't watch them long enough to know if it was about her. It didn't especially matter. She turned back to her beer. She was used to it. She had been used to it for 18 years. The assessments, the categories, the polite, automatic minimization. She had stopped being angry about it somewhere around year 6, because anger is expensive, and she had needed the energy for other things. What replaced the anger was something quieter and harder. Not bitterness, not quite. More like a patient, settled knowledge of exactly who she was and what she had done, held privately, requiring no external confirmation. She had built her identity in a place where most people would never look. She knew exactly what she was. She ordered another beer she didn't want. The bar had settled into its late evening rhythm. The jukebox stayed broken. The television showed the same football highlights on loop. She thought about her daughter. She thought about the morning's meeting and what would happen after. The paperwork, the handshake, the end of something that had consumed most of her adult life. She tried to feel something clean about it and couldn't quite. The feelings were too layered, too compressed. 18 years of compression. She was reaching for her jacket when one of the men from the pool table group approached the bar. Not the tall one, a different one, shorter. With a phone in his hand, and an expression she couldn't immediately read. He stopped a few feet away. He was looking at her, really looking at her, not the way his friend had looked at her. This was different. This was the look of someone running a recognition process that hasn't completed yet. "Ma'am," he said, and the word came out carefully, the way words come out when someone is suddenly unsure of their footing. "This is gonna sound strange. But did you ever work in the Bagram corridor? 2016. She went very still, not physically. She was practiced enough that nothing in her body moved except the quality of her attention, which shifted from ambient to absolute. She looked at him directly. "Why?" His mouth opened, closed. He turned toward the group and said something. All four of them looked over now. The tall one, all of them. The tall one was already walking over. He was not smirking now. He stopped in front of her, and he looked at her the same way his friend was looking at her. Like something was being reconstructed in real time, piece by piece. Each piece changing the shape of the whole. His jaw was tight. He looked down at his phone where his friend had apparently pulled up something. He looked back at her. "Are you Elena Vasquez?" he asked. And his voice was completely different now. The performance was gone, just the voice underneath. She held his gaze. "Depends on who's asking." "I'm Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb," he said. And then quieter, "I was on the ground in Kandahar province. October 2016. We were in a position that was supposed to be a clean extraction, turned into something else." He stopped. Something was moving across his face that he wasn't entirely in control of. 4 men were pinned down. The strike package we had was blown. We had 20 minutes before the window closed and it was going to be over. The bar continued around them. The television, the low voices, none of it mattered. "A single operator override came in on our comms," he said. "No call sign, no rank, no unit designation, just a voice. Said she had eyes on the position from above. Said she could thread a precision engagement through a 12-meter gap between friendlies and the target cluster." He was watching her face as he said this, watching it with absolute focus. "Our co said it was impossible, said the margins were too tight, said no qualified operator would attempt it." He paused. His hands, she noticed, were no longer quite steady. And then the voice said one thing, just one thing. His voice had dropped now to something barely above the ambient noise of the bar. The voice said, "This is Viper 1, I have the shot. Trust me or don't, but I'm taking it." The name landed in the air between them like something with physical mass. Viper 1. She had not heard that call sign spoken aloud by anyone outside of a classified environment in 6 years. Not since they'd buried the program. She'd worked under and scattered its records across 3 separate intelligence compartments and marked its personnel files with access restrictions that required a specific level of clearance most generals didn't have. She had not heard it because that was the entire point. Viper 1 was not supposed to exist in any conversation happening in a bar in a coastal town on a Tuesday night in November. She sat with the name for a moment, let it settle. Then she picked up her beer, took one slow sip, set it down with the same measured calm she set everything down with. And she looked at Marcus Webb, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, Navy SEAL, who had smirked at her 40 minutes ago from across a room and sorted her into a category and found the category manageable. She looked at him the way she looked at things she'd already calculated. "All 4 of your men made it out," she said quietly, not a question. His breath went out of him like something breaking loose from a long hold. "Yes," he said. "Yes, ma'am, all four," she nodded once. "I wasn't sure," she said. "I had the shot. I took the shot." The confirmation was delayed. By the time I knew the extraction succeeded, the unit designation had already been scrubbed from my report. I didn't know the names. I didn't know the faces. She glanced around at the four of them, the men who had been laughing by the pool table 20 minutes ago, who were now standing in a loose semicircle with an expression she had only seen on people who are confronting the sudden, vertiginous gap between who they thought a person was and who that person actually is. "I never knew any of you," she said. Marcus Webb put his hand on the bar to steady himself, not dramatically. Just the quiet, instinctive way a person reaches for something solid when the ground has shifted. He was looking at her, and she could see it happening, the full recalibration. Not just of the last 40 minutes, but of the entire shape of that night in Kandahar. The voice that had come through their comms in the darkness of that corridor. The voice that had been female, that had been impossibly calm. That had said "trust me" or "don't" in a tone that somehow contained both the absolute permission for them to refuse and the absolute certainty that she was going to take the shot regardless. That voice, and this woman. "You were flying a modified SR platform at 31,000 feet, he said, and it wasn't a question either now. He was just saying the thing aloud to make it real. The precision window on that shot, our guys ran the numbers afterward. The probability of success estimate on a shot like that with those margins was listed as 17%. 16, she said. He stared at her. It was 16%, she said. I ran it 4 times in the 7 minutes I had before the window. It was 16, the smallest possible pause. I liked the odds. One of his friends, the shorter one who had approached her first, made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite anything else. A sound that was something releasing. Marcus Webb looked at her for a long time. The smirk was so far gone it was as if it had never existed. What was in his face instead was something that had no performance in it at all. It was the face of a man who has just understood something about the shape of his own life, about a specific night that had redefined every night that came after it. About 4 men who had gotten to go home and have other nights and other drinks and other pool table conversations and other ordinary Tuesdays, and understood now with complete, irreversible clarity exactly why. I've thought about that voice, he said. I've thought about it for 7 years. We all have. He looked at the others and they didn't need to confirm it. It was written in the way they were standing. I always imagined, he stopped, started again. You assumed something specific, she said, and there was nothing sharp in her voice. Just knowledge. Yes, he said. There was no point in softening it. I assumed something specific, and I was wrong about it. She let that sit between them for the appropriate amount of time. Not to make him feel it more than he already did, just because it deserved to sit. It doesn't matter, she said finally. And she meant it, not in the way people say it when they mean the opposite, but in the way of someone who has held themselves together with something far stronger than the need to be recognized. It didn't change what I did. It didn't change why I did it. Why did you take it? He asked. 16%. Those odds our co would have called off the shot. Most operators would have called off the shot. She was quiet for a moment, not because she didn't know the answer, but because the answer lived in a part of her she didn't often open in places like this. She thought about 18 years. She thought about her daughter's birthday last month. She thought about the meeting tomorrow and the paperwork and the handshake and the phrase "your service" was invaluable delivered in the wrong tone by someone who had never sat at 31,000 feet and run the numbers 4 times in 7 minutes while 4 men were waiting in the dark. Because 16% is not 0, she said. The bar breathed around them. Marcus Webb straightened, slowly, fully. He came to attention, not a rigid performative salute, nothing theatrical. Just the straightening of a man who understands that there are moments that require the body to mean something. He extended his hand to her. She looked at it, then at him. Then she took it. His grip was firm, hers was firmer. "Ma'am," he said, and this time the word carried every weight it was supposed to carry. "I don't know what else to say. I don't think I have the right words." "You don't need them," she said. She pulled on her jacket. She picked up her bottle, finished the last third of her beer in a long, steady pull, and set it on the bar with a soft, final sound. She looked at all four of them one last time. These men who had come home from a night they had never fully stopped living in, just like her, just from a different position on the same darkness. "Get home safe," she said, "all of you." She walked toward the door. The jukebox in the corner stayed broken. The television showed the same footage on the same loop. The bar went on being exactly what it was. She pushed through the door into the cold November air and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, hands in her jacket pockets, and looked up. The sky was the kind of clear that only comes after something has passed through, high and black and sharp with stars. The kind of sky that makes the world feel ancient and very serious, and not particularly concerned, with the small, heavy dramas that play out beneath it. She thought about 16%. She thought about all the moments in a life that come down to that, to a number that isn't zero, to a choice that has no guarantee attached to it, to the simple, enormous act of taking the shot anyway because four people are in the dark, and you are the only one with the angle. Most of the things worth doing in a life look like that from the inside. Terrible odds, insufficient light, no confirmation until long after the moment has passed. You take the shot, or you don't. She walked to her car. The night was cold and clear and full of stars that had been burning for longer than anyone alive could comprehend. She got in. She sat for a moment in the silence before starting the engine. She thought about her daughter, about the morning's meeting, about what came after endings, which was always, always something, even when it didn't feel like it yet. She started the car. She drove into the night, carrying everything she'd always carried, and nothing heavier or lighter than before, just clearer somehow. Just a little more certain that the weight had always been worth it, even when no one knew she was the one carrying it, especially then.